Nothing like another webinar. Hopefully, even though we're probably the 10th one you've seen this week, this will absolutely be the best one. We're focused on delivering value, having some fun, making sure you get good information. My name is Steve Taplin, and I am the CEO of Sonify Technology. We are a custom enterprise software development company. We focus on modern cloud and mobile tech stacks, and we also have a phenomenal AI consultancy that we help clients get started on the beast of what AI is. So, on the call today, our agenda, the first half hour, we're purely going to talk about code reviews and the importance of them and how we take our clients through the code review process from setting up the environment to the things we look at, how we go about it, and the benefits. Sonatify Technology right now is offering free code reviews for clients. We typically in the past would charge around $10,000 for these, but we're offering them right now because there's such importance of just making sure you're taking a fresh look at your code. Sometimes you've inherited that code from many people and people who held your position before you. Sometimes just it's good to get a second opinion on it. Then part two, we're going to dive into AI. And when you read about AI and all the money people are spending, we are specifically going to talk about ways to save money when implementing AI projects. So with that, let's dive right in. Once again, my name is Steve Taplin. I'm the CEO of Sonify Technology. I've been a lifelong serial technology entrepreneur and absolutely love educating, helping others, and make the most of digital transformation, make the most of AI. Dr. Antonio Tamayo is our lead AI engineer who's going to be talking on the second part of the presentation around cost savings for it. And then Alex Ramirez, who is the director of software engineering at Sonify Technology. So with that, let's jump right in. Sonify Technology, once again, we are a custom software development company. We are headquartered in the US, and our niche is that our engineers are out of Latin America, where you're getting senior engineers fully bilingual that are natively on the same time zone as US clients. We've had the honor of being on the Inc. 5000 list for the past couple of years. We continue to work hard to earn various industry awards. I also write for Forbes and Entrepreneur on thought leadership around software, the technology industry. And our company is really focused on providing high quality resources, high quality software projects at lower costs than if you were to do them in the US. And we're excited about jumping into this webinar itself. I talked about our AI competency. We do offer for potential clients that we will build out free AI MVPs. And wait a minute, what do you mean free? We always, whenever, if you were to put 10 technology leaders in a room, you would get 10 different definitions of what AI is. And the way we like to help clients with AI is let's just pick out a specific area, a small project to start on. And we will build out a proof of concept to train a model to do what you're looking for. And that is a big part of our services and helping clients with the journey to AI. And it's such a buzzword out there. Unfortunately, not many companies are truly utilizing it, and we like to help push companies over the hump on that. So moving along, why do a code review? Why at Sonify Technology do we even offer them? And at the end of the day, when you're part of a company, a development team, if you're a director or VP of software engineering, CIO, CTO, when your head is down in that code all the time, sometimes it's hard to take a step back and take a fresh look at the code. And so that's a big part of what our service does. We do a deep dive analysis. We provide a comprehensive report. And the goal is to uncover hidden issues, to point out where you are and are not using best practices, tips for optimizing performance and to help a plan for evolving your code in the future. And so this is what we're going to dive into on this first part of this presentation is how we go about this. So with that, Alex Ramirez, I'm going to turn this over to you to talk tech here and talk the technical details on how we do it.
Thank you, Steve. First of all, I'm really excited to be here with you all. So yeah, now let's take a look at how our code review process is broken down. So first, our primary objective is simple: to evaluate the quality, security, and performance of your code. We make sure your software not only works, but it's also secure and optimized for performance. So the process is structured into several phases. We begin with the initial setup and client coordination. That's where we align your team and understand your project context. Then we move to the preparation and environment setup, ensuring everything is ready for review. Next, we run automatic checks to catch standard issues quickly, followed by manual review, where our expert dive deeper into code structure, design, and functionality. A security assessment ensures your code is protected from vulnerabilities. Finally, we wrap everything up with feedback and in a report where we present you our findings. So what you get is a detailed assessment report, easy to understand scorecard, and actionable recommendations to improve your code quality and security. This ensures your project is not only functional, but built to last.
And
So
Alex, I know you're going to cover this in the presentation, but everybody always asks, wait a minute, can you just have AI do a full code review? Or what can AI be? When can it be used? When it can't? What needs to be manual? And I know you're going to be covering this here, and that's the question I know I always get when I'm talking with clients about it.
yeah, I mean, I think there's reasonable concerns. There's a lot of AI tools out there, but you have to be mindful what the terms and conditions are. Will your code end up out there training model data? So you have to be very careful on how you utilize AI tools.
Awesome. All right, keep diving in on how we go about this process with Sonata.
Good. All right. So the first phase of our process is the initial coordination and setup. It all starts with the client coordination. During this step, we work together to define the scope of the assessment, what we'll be reviewing, any inclusions or exclusions, and agree on timelines and deliverables to ensure we are aligned to on expectations. Now, before moving forward, we handle the necessary legal agreements like NDAs, SOW, and we make sure we have proper access authorization. Next is the environment setup phase. We begin by checking out your code. From there, we move into setting up the environment, installing dependencies, configuring the environment variables to replicate your working conditions. Um, of course, if this is part of the scope of the project. Once everything is set, we validate the application, we build and run it, perform version operational tests, just to ensure everything is working as expected. And finally, we confirm everything with the client before diving deeper into the code review, just making sure everything is working as expected before we dive in. All right. So the first thing is we run automated static code analysis, which help us identify issues quickly. So we start with linting. We assess the linting rules already in place for your project. We ensure they follow current best practices, and if needed, um, suggest improvements. If you don't have like linting setup, we can make recommendations and even offer a pull request with the changes. For static analysis, we're on SemGrep to catch bugs and code smells, and we recommend more tailored tools for your specific tech stack. Um, Dependency management. we generate a list of all your dependencies and scan for vulnerabilities with tools like Sneak or with any tools that you already have on your pipeline but are not fully using. Finally, we run automated tests. This is unit integration and end-to-end tests if they are available. Our focus is to find any critical areas that aren't covered yet, and we'll follow up with findings and suggest on how to close these gaps in the next steps. Now we move on to one of my favorite parts, the manual code and security assessment. In the manual code review, we start carefully reading the code, evaluating the structure, readability, adherence to coding standards. We also assess the use of design patterns and dig into the architectural choices doing.
Alex, let me interrupt you for a minute. You said your favorite part is doing a manual code review. Are you sick in the head? What's wrong with you?
No, I mean, I really enjoy it. It's like getting to know someone. Like you see how everything relates together, issues, trends. So yeah, this is.
Man, you know you're a senior engineer when you get excited to do manual code reviews. I tell you.
So we assess the design patterns, dig into the architectural choices to ensure that the technologies used follow best practices for their specific combination and the context in which they are applied. Then we conduct a performance analysis to provide the application and to profile the application and identify any potential bottlenecks that there might be affecting performance. Now, on the security assessment side, we start by analyzing data flow across the application. This involves looking at how data moves between different components like front end and back end and checking for vulnerabilities such as unprotected data or insecure communication. And next, we perform vulnerability scanning using tools like OWASP and Burp Suite. Finally, we conduct a manual security review, inspecting code for common security flaws and verifying that authentication and data protection mechanisms are properly implemented. So this phase give us a hands-on look at how well the code is structured and secured. Uh, Now let's talk about how we use AI tools during our code reviews. So AI help us understand your code more efficiently. It assists in analyzing your code structure, organization, giving us like a clear view of the architecture. We also use AI to identify key design patterns present in your code, ensuring best practices are followed. Additionally, AI provides detailed insight into specific pieces of code, helping us uncover deeper insights more quickly. However, there are some things we don't use AI for. We don't use AI to modify or update your code. And we also don't use AI to train internal or third party models with your data. We place the highest priority on protecting your data. We ensure that customer data privacy is respected throughout our process. We use services like OpenAI. We make sure data is never used to train external models or shared outside the project scope. To maintain these standards, we continuously review third-party policies to ensure we meet the highest data protection requirements. This is how our code review report breaks down. Each area we analyze is given a score that's up to 100 points. Oh, here we cover all the points that we that have gone through the review. Depending on the project scope, there are some areas that have limited visibility or relevance. So we adjust like the weight of different points based on the specifics of the project. So, and this flexible approach allow us to tailor the review to the specific project while maintaining a comprehensive evaluation. Okay, next slide. So this is a breakdown on how the points are distributed about the different steps of the process. Again, as I mentioned, so depending on the scope, some projects might have better visibility than others on some specific areas.
So
And
Alec, what's a good score here? Is this like like high school and college where 90 and above is an A, 80 to 90 is a B? Like what's a good score we've seen here? What
like,
expectations should people have?
yeah, like realistically, anything above 85 is good. Like, projects move really fast. Um, Most of the time, the focus will be on features. So, yeah, I think like 85 and above is very healthy.
Excellent. Well, appreciate that walkthrough, Alex. And we get a lot of questions on our code review process, how we go about it, why we do it. And I know Alex had mentioned this, but basically the process to do the code review is you reach out to our team. We do NDA agreements as well as we will typically do an MSA and SOW, even though there's no cost for this. And um, so to Alex's point, we want to give the client the assurance that the data is being handled in a secure manner, that it's not being used for anything else for this analysis. And then we get together as a team and really determine what scope we want to focus on, what are the things that are important, and the security standards for your business, your industry, for your goals. Then, as Alex mentioned, you submit your code. We do an analysis. It typically takes us about 2 weeks to do these code reviews as we're going through a full step process. There's going to be a lot of questions back and forth. And for us to have our report ready, it's typically about a 2 week process. Um, Regardless of all the phenomenal AI tools out there and efficiencies, as Alex mentioned, there is a big manual component to this. And it's a good thing we have guys like Alex. That's fun because uh, I love it. That's why you're the director of software engineering for our global company because because I know I'm not. Uh, so that is the process. Once again, everybody, we do offer a free code review. This is a $10,000 event. It's our way of earning your trust as a client, and hopefully help point some things out. And many times we see technology leaders know that everything's not perfect. They know it's not going to be 100% because they don't have the budget to make it 100%. And oftentimes there's a lot of well-known things. If we were to go back to the scorecard here, we're many times clients will know certain things haven't been a priority. So then when you look at a score, it's like, all right, even though maybe the total score here was only 70%, but maybe of that, there were only 80 points of the 100 that were critical for your business. And so it all depends. And, most tech leaders have a good idea of what the organization is doing good and what they're not. We all don't always have the budget to do everything following all processes. And so it's always a matter of priority. So thank you again, Alex. Appreciate that. And let's, when we look at case studies of clients that have gone through the code review process, and we have been doing these code reviews for 4 years now, there are so many potential cost savings. And we all know that if you're running bad code, if you're running inefficient code, if you have security vulnerabilities, there's a lot of different areas that can negatively affect your business. Many times, as tech leaders, we're always trying to justify budget we need, whether it's for the software engineering teams or other technology areas. And we all know the business doesn't always give us the budget that we want. And so we have seen through doing dozens and dozens of these code reviews over the years where the potential cost savings around early detection of issues, certainly around security, around improved developer productivity has been a big one where we're helping identify how things can be done in a different way that help developers work more efficiently. We all know if anybody has an environment that has been around for more than 5 years, there's probably lots of technical debt in there. And people know that, and it's always about a plan in the right manner to attack that. So these are all the different areas where we've seen it affect clients and have a positive results for them. This chart we have created over the years as everybody, we always see technical leaders focused on justifying why this needs to be done. And so we've definitely seen big potential cost savings. And like we mentioned, this is something that right now we are offering at no charge as a way to earn your trust here in the marketplace. So let's now jump to the second half of this webinar. And we tried something different here where we all, these are really two unrelated topics. We had a lot of requests around our code review process and what we do, so we wanted to cover it. And then this next topic that Antonio Tamayo is going to jump into is around ways to focus on cost efficiencies on your AI project. So Antonio, I am going to turn this over to you, my friend.
Okay, thank you, Steve, and thank you, Alice, for that interesting information about the code review. As you mentioned in this second part of our AI workshop, we're talking about cost optimization in AI-based projects. So, first of all, I would like to say that to talk about cost efficiency and or cost optimization in AI-based projects, we need to go through a balance between the cloud services or cloud resources and open source tools for cost optimization. So, first of all, I would like to say that we can use cloud services for scalability, and we need to keep in mind open source tools at the same time for flexibility and low costs development. So it is well known that cloud providers such as AWS, Azure, or GCP offer us a very wide range of services or resources to go through our AI-based projects. But we need to look for a balance between the cloud services or resources and the open source tools that we have. So that's the first key point, because it depends on the type of project that we have. It depends on the amount of data that we have in our project. But it is important to notice that if we can use open source tools, at least for the initial steps during our development process in an AI-based project, we can reduce the costs. And it depends on the amount of data that we have in our project that we can decide if we can continue using open source tools or if we need to move to the cloud for deployment or for the data pipeline implementation. But we need to keep in mind both things. So that's the first thing that we need to mention about cost efficiency. Go to the next slide, please. So likewise, talking about optimization of resource utilization, we need to consider the cloud resources for intensive tasks, right? If we need, for example, heavy computation, or if we need to carry out an ETL process, remember that we have mentioned the ETL process in our in our others workshops. The ETL is the extraction, transformation, and loading process that is mandatory in all the AI based projects that we want to carry out. So for optimization of the resources utilization, we can decide between the cloud resources or local machines or on-premise processes. So what is the key point here? If we are facing with a very heavy ETL process, for example, we can use the resources that we have in the cloud, but it depends on the time that we will need it because the costs in cloud are really high. So for the initial steps or for the proof of concepts or MVPs, we can use so many open source tools to run the initial steps in our projects in local machines or maybe in our own environment, and we can reduce the costs during this part of the projects, right? So that's important to mention. In general, maybe we can think in a process in our local machines or our on-premise processes for the initial steps of our projects or for prototyping. But as I mentioned before, it depends on the amount of data that we have. Because maybe if you have a startup, for example, if you have a small data set, and it depends on the problem that you are facing, so you can continue using open source tools, and maybe you can move forward to the cloud just to use an EC2 instance, for example, in AWS or wherever you want in other cloud provider. And you can deploy an entire project using open source tools. It depends on the project, as I mentioned, but it is important to keep both in mind.
Antonio, these items are so important because we've seen even organizations with large budgets are being scrutinized every which way. And we are very much for doing proof of concepts of AI prior to taking on the beast and the elephant of it, because certainly when we see organizations that have large amounts of data, that data is not always ready for generative AI processes, is it?
Yeah, that's very important. But maybe for the initial steps, it depends on the amount of data that you have. But we can use open source tools in the initial steps, and maybe we can decide to move forward. But that's important. Maybe data is the most important value that the companies have right now. So the next one. On the other hand, we need to talk about flexibility and control if we are talking about cost optimization in AI-based projects. In this part, I would like to say that for flexibility and control, we need to keep both in mind: cloud services, cloud resources, and open source tools. Why? Because maybe for flexibility and control, a hybrid approach is the key, right? It depends on the project that we're facing, but sometimes we can use part of the resources that we have in the cloud, and for other processes or other steps, we can use open source tools to do that. But for example, for flexibility, we can avoiding a vendor lock-in, right? Because if we are planning to use the cloud services, we need to think that if we use all the resources, all the services that one cloud provider offer us, maybe later on the project, we will need to continue using only the services or resources inside the same cloud provider. So it could be useful to think in different sources, different tools. As I mentioned before, at least in the initial steps of the project, at least for the proof of concept, because we will see the different tools or different scenarios that we will have, and we can do a good, we can make a good decision later on in the project. So for flexibility and control, maybe we need to keep in mind both, right? It depends on the project that we will decide for the tools.
And Antonio, we had a great question come in, and I'm from Quinn Jones, and I'm going to display it here. But love for you to share your thoughts on this. What is the preferred open source big data platform for housing and parsing large amounts of data? What are your thoughts on this?
When we talk about big data, I think maybe in the next slide I will talk about that. But maintenance is a very relevant part in the project, because if we are talking about big data, we are talking about a really huge amount of data. So maybe we will need the cloud for maintenance, right? So that's important. Maybe I will prefer a cloud provider for this type of project. Mhm. So that's
And,
important.
and Antonio, the second part of this question was, Snowflake and Databricks are certainly big data platforms out there, but are you aware of any better open source solutions for this?
Yeah, that's really important, because we have two options. We can combine the open source tools and the cloud services. For example, we have very good open source tools and very robust tools, and we can use it and we can combine that with the cloud services. Maybe we can uh, install or implement or communicate the open source tools with our account in the cloud, and maybe we can reduce costs for that. But maybe the key point here is the maintenance of the tools, right? So this is the slide that we have here, because if we need to talk about maintenance and sustainability, right? And for example, for the project using big data or a lot of data, we need to think about the maintenance in the time, right? In a long term for the project. So that's a very important decision. But before the transition to the cloud, we need to carry out experimentation, and we need to implement the first steps, the first models. And that's the way I'm saying we can use open source tools. But for deployment and for a big project, I think we need to uh, use the cloud services and resources, right? So um, likewise, for flexibility and control, and for maintenance and long-term sustainability, we need to keep both in mind: the resources that we have in the cloud and the all open source tools that we can use. We are talking about artificial intelligence, so I didn't mention all the open source tools that we have. For example, we can use all the arsenal that we have in the cloud, Azure, GCP, AWS, whatever you decide for your project. But we have, for example, TensorFlow, PyTorch, Scikit-learn, Airflow, MLflow. All those tools are free, right? So we can combine all the arsenal of the cloud and all the power all these tools to reduce the cost in our project. It depends on the architecture, it depends on a lot of features that we have in our projects, but we need to keep both in mind. We have two scenarios and we can combine that if we want to reduce the costs of our projects. Mhm. So here we have 10 tips. We prepared 10 tips and examples for cost optimization in general for AI-based projects. The first tip is leverage scalability and flexibility. So here we have good examples that maybe can fit with your projects right now. For example, suppose you are training a machine learning model for image recognition. So, as I mentioned before, for image recognition, we can use convolutional neural networks, and we can implement that using TensorFlow or PyTorch, for example. We uh, we don't have to pay for TensorFlow or PyTorch for the usage, but for the deployment, maybe we can use our cloud provider. So we can combine all of them to reduce the cost. That's a good example. The second one is to minimize infrastructure management, for example. For infrastructure, my point of view is you need the cloud, right? Because that is easier, and it depends on the amount of data that you have. It depends on the project you have, but cloud is the best option for infrastructure. But you don't need to use all the services, all the resources that the cloud providers offer us. You can combine that. We have different options, open source tools, and we can combine them, right? For example, you can use for a natural language processing project, you can use GCP platform, for example, to manage all the infrastructure, but you can use Hugging Face, right? Hugging Face is free and you can pay um, I don't remember how much, but that's cheaper. That's very really cheap. So you can use Hugging Face to deploy, to develop, for experimentation, and you can deploy your model. And for the infrastructure, you can use your cloud provider. So you can communicate all of them to reduce the costs. The third tip is reduce licensing costs. For example, that's I'm talking about. If we are using free tools, open source tools, uh, we can optimize the cost in our project. The fourth tip is optimize development speed. For example, if you're, if you're developing a recommendation system, you can use Amazon SageMaker, for example, a really good service from AWS for hyperparameter tuning and deployment of your models, for example. But you can combine that with an open source tool like such as LightG BM, for example. That's an interesting approach, a hybrid approach to reduce your costs. Jump to the next, please. Okay, uh, if we are planning to use the cloud, in the cloud we have pay per use compute power, right? Pay as you go. That's the scheme that we have in the cloud. So we need to take advantage of that for deep learning, for example. If we have a project for image processing, for example, we will need to use GPUs, and we can combine the use of GPUs in Google Colab, for example, and the infrastructure can be in the cloud, right? So we can combine all of them. That's a good example for that. Uh, about flexible data storage options, that's a really good example. For example, if we have a machine learning pipeline that processes massive data sets, and we can use AWS, for example, to store all the data. We can use S3 or whatever you want in AWS. But we have other services, other tools. For example, DVZ. Maybe so many people don't know about that, but DVC is a data version control. So if we are using a lot of data, if we are using big data, for example, we can think in the storing in a open source tool, and we can combine that with our infrastructure in our cloud provider. So that's a really good example also. The next one is a hybrid workflow for cost control. That's maybe the one of the most important points here. I've been talking about that during all the presentation. A hybrid workflow is for the initial steps. I need to use open source tools. I need to use dummy data. I can use Google Colab. I can use TensorFlow, Scikit-learn, all the tools that I mentioned before in order to develop the first steps of our project, even proof of concept, a fully proof of concepts or MVP. So that's the hybrid workflow. After that, we need to decide if we need the cloud for the ETL, the full ETL process, or the implementation of the data pipeline and the deployment, right? But that's a hybrid workflow. The next one is the benefit from cloud native AI APIs. That's a really good point. We have a lot of services, a lot of APIs that we can use for different ETL processes, for different data pipelines, and we need to identify the best option because sometimes we have a lot of open source tools to do something, but maybe if we carry out that in the cloud, it could be cheaper than if we use our own tools, right? So we need to know about all the resources, all the APIs that we have in the cloud also, right? Go to the next one. And finally, the next example is to automate the CI/CD pipelines with cloud and open source tools. We have interesting tools, open source tools such as Jenkins, for example, an open source CI/CD tool, and we can combine that, for example, with Kubernetes. So not always we need to use all the services that we have in the cloud, and not always we need to use all the services on premise or our own services. We need to combine all of them. And finally, we should take advantage of cloud native monitoring and security. That's a key point because I mentioned before that maintenance and sustainability is a very relevant part when we have our projects deployed. So for monitoring, we need to use the cloud, right? There are a lot of services that we can use to reduce the costs of our project. For example, in AWS, we have CloudWatch, but we have a lot of services that we can use in order to monitor the billing of our projects. So that's important. Okay, go to the next one. On the other hand, you know that we have been talking about large language models, generative AI. That's the buzzword today. And we have three tips to use large language models and generative AI for cost optimization. The first one is we can use generative AI to automate data augmentation and synthesis. Maybe the mm, to collect the data, we will have problems because we can have a really small data set for our project, but we can use generative AI to increase the data for augmentation purposes. So that's important. If we are facing with a supervised problem in artificial intelligence, we need to have a database with a target variable. And if we have a really small data set, we can use this approach in order to get more data. Because if we have more data, and it depends on the quality also, but if we have more data, we can expect better results of our models. The second step is efficient model development and fine tuning. Behind the scenes, here we are talking about the transfer learning technique. We have very, very good large language models available for us. BERT, for example, the versions of GPT, Llama, all the large language models that we have available, and we can use it for our purposes, for our projects, using our small data sets. So if we use the transfer learning technique, we don't need to train our models from scratch. And um, it is sure that we will get better results using this technique. And the third one is to automate code and workflow generations. Nowadays, as a developers, we need to use large language models. We need to use generative AI to type code, and then we need to adapt that in order to achieve our goals quickly. Go to the next one. Finally, we want to present three tips to reduce costs with the most recent framework that we have from natural language processing that we have in artificial intelligence nowadays. That is retrieval augmented generation. That is a very interesting framework, and we have three tips to reduce costs in our projects using this framework. The first one is to minimize the frequency of model retraining. What happened behind the scenes here? When you have your model deployed in your project, when you have your company working with AI, you have a deployed model, right? So, but all the data is changing. Maybe in your business, every day you are getting new data, and if you have the model deployed, you can think, oh, if I have new data, I need to retrain my model in order to put all the data that I have to get more accurate results. So with retrieval augmented generation, you don't have to think of that, right? Because you can combine both the model that you have trained with the first data set that you have, and then you can combine that with this framework in order to get external information from external resources, and we can get accurate answers. So that's the first step. The second one, go to the next one, is to separate the retrieval and generation component. Behind the scenes, when we use retrieval augmented generation, we are separating the retrieval and the generation component. So if you have a model that you train with the first data set that you have, and you have new data, so when you use retrieval augmented generation, you need to retrieve all the new information that you have in different and external sources, and then we can leverage the answers from our large language model, combining all the information. That's a very interesting approach. And this is the second tip. And the third one is optimize the storage costs with RAG. Why? Because if we don't need to store all the new data that we collect, thinking of retraining of the model, we need to store all the new data as index, right? Index it and compress it. So we will use less storage, right? So we will pay less for that. So that's a very good point. Finally, we would like to share with you the secrets that we found in this process.
I feel like we need a drum roll here.
Yeah. So we have three secrets. Share that. The first one is your AI-based project must be run using a hybrid approach. We need to use the cloud services and cloud resources, but we need to keep both in mind. We have open source libraries and frameworks. That's the first secret. The second one is if you have a project and your project doesn't use generative AI, you need to evaluate the possibilities of this new technology. Because if you use generative AI in your project, you will reduce costs and improve the machine learning operation processes. And finally, we need to implement RAG in our AI-based projects. That's it. And now we have three secrets for our AI-based projects to reduce the cost, to optimize the cost on our projects. Thank you.
And thank you, Antonio. And that was a good in-depth of some great tips from an AI perspective, how to go about it. I know we've covered a lot on this webinar. We appreciate everybody attending. If reach out to us, we will make this presentation available. If you'd like to schedule a code review, we have the link here to do that. If you'd like to receive an AI roadmap or talk about an AI MVP, which we also do for no charge, we have the link there. We're appreciate everybody's time. Alex and Antonio, great job covering your respective areas. And if there's one thing I don't like, it's boring webinars. So I think we did a great job, everybody, of keeping these technical concepts in depth. And so thank you to everybody listening here. We're here to help in any way possible. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.